Hi, I'm Michelle King. I'm with Colliers Engineering and Design, and I'm also the chair of the Telecommunications Industry Foundation. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about the concept of intended use as defined in the TIF white paper called the Intended Use of Structures with a emphasis on small cell 2020 update. Here with me to talk about this critical topic is Jared Tibbetts from Tower Engineering Solutions, Justin Klein with Paul J. Ford, and Lemmy Recinos with Colliers Engineering and Design. As telecommunications industry advances, for the benefit of society, more and more telecommunications equipment is going to be placed on non-traditional structures. And I think for all of you as professional engineers in our industry, it's very straightforward when you're putting telecommunications equipment on a traditional cell tower that was intended for the design of the telecommunications equipment. However, it muddies the waters a little bit when you're looking at some non-traditional structures. So Jared, I'll turn to you first. Can you help us understand what the concept of intended use is?
Yeah, so intended use is looking at structures that support multiple services, whether that be utility, water towers, also telecommunications. We look at the structure and we are able to determine what is its main or intended service. And with that, we're able to determine which codes apply to what parts of the structure.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that you might use a different code or standard for one part of the structure versus another part of the structure based on what its primary intended use is. How does this blended codes approach impact the reliability of these individual structures?
Ideally, it wouldn't impact the reliability if it's done right. So, first you have to use engineering judgment to decide what is the intended use of the structure and what is the standard that would apply to that, right? And then also look at when you're adding this additional loading, say it's cell towers to a water tank, is that going to change or undermine the actual reliability and intended use of that structure? Because if it did, you might have to look at a different standard depending on what's happening, right? But when we look at things like utility towers, right? The idea that you can look at one standard for say the antenna equipment and then maybe default to the intended use standard for that, it should be compatible. And if done right, it shouldn't reduce the reliability of the overall structure. So, but Lemmy, I know you've looked at a lot of these different things with the mounting frames. What would you do, say, for the antenna loads?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think a good example is, say, Jared and I have a mutual client that approaches us to install new telecommunications equipment on a water tower. And Jared is responsible for the analysis of the water tower, and I'm responsible for procuring and analyzing a new mount. I can look at the intended use of that mount, which is strictly telecommunications equipment, and defer directly to TIA 222 to analyze and design that mount to get my reactions. And then I can take those reactions and pass them on to Jared and say, when this mount is installed on your supporting structure, here's the loads that we'll impose on the structure. Jared can then look at those loads and determine what's the intended use of his supporting structure and perform the analysis to the appropriate code or standard using the reactions and the loads that I'm providing to him from the telecommunications specific analysis.
Okay, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that the two different engineering firms could collaborate by each analyzing independent structures that are making up one structural system. So how do you determine where one structure ends and where another begins?
So I think a lot of it, again, is engineering judgment, right? So again, it's the degree of the impact of kind of the secondary use, right? So if for instance, you had a structure that was designed, like let's take a building, right, for, just with IBC and with AAC 7 type loading, right? But maybe you had antenna equipment that was going to really greatly change the intended use or even the how that structure was going to work. Then you might have to default to a different standard based on that. But most times it should be compatible to be able to just let the original structure intended use kind of remain and let the antenna loading still default to the TIA. So you and I had talked about a couple of different examples of this. I know that we have been talking about, especially like rooftop work. There's some times where this works out pretty well. You want to kind of talk about?
Yeah, no, I think a good example is, let's say you're co-locating antennas on the side of a penthouse, correct? The intended use of that penthouse is to protect whatever mechanical equipment or elevator equipment, whatever is inside that penthouse. By you adding those antennas to it, you're not changing the main purpose and use of that penthouse. And you can then look at that and clearly differentiate, here's the existing penthouse, its intended use is the building purpose that it was designed for. here's this connection with these antennas out. The intended use of the structure supporting these antennas is telecommunications. I can analyze that to TIA 222, and I have that clear distinction. Obviously, some cases it may be a little bit more difficult, but you do have to use your engineering judgment to determine where is the existing structure, where's the new telecommunication structure that I'm adding to it, and then differentiating so you know where to use which correct standard and how the intended use of the telecommunications equipment versus the telecommunication really intended use of the supporting structure.
Thank you all for helping us understand the concept of intended use and how to apply it. You can go to our website on tiponline.org to read the intended use white paper and other relevant topics. Thank you.